What is up, guys? Dubhead Spartan here. Welcome back to the channel. Little bonus content for you here. You are currently looking at the upcoming new branches of Swedish tanks in World of Tanks. I am currently on the 9.17 test server as we speak, bringing you this extra update. And I figured I would show off some of the stats of these tanks and my opinions of them. To start off both branches, we have the STRV FM21 light tank. It's a tier 1. It's got two options, a 37mm and a 20mm autocannon. Fairly standard for a tier 1, nothing special. We'll do the mixed light, medium, heavy line first, and then we'll do the tank destroyer line. Moving on, we have the STRV M38, which has, again, options for a 20mm autocannon or a 37mm pop gun, like this. But the penetration, going from here to here, see this one has 27, this one has 33. You go over to here, the 20mm has 31 pen, and the 37 has 55 pen now. So, gets upgraded a little bit. Average light tank, nothing too terribly special. These tanks do have good gun depression. They do have that on their side. The tier 3 is the STRV M40L. It's got two different 37mm guns, one from the tier 2 and a new 37mm with 78 pen, and those stats right there. Again, average light tank, average tier 3 light tank, nothing too terribly special. The medium tanks of this branch start at tier 4 with the Lago here. The stock gun is a 47mm right there, which can be upgraded to a 57 with alright pen, alright stats. They won't, destroy the grind of getting through this thing, if you grind it at all. And it ends on a fairly punchy 7.5cm gun here, which is right there. At tier 5, we have the STRV M42, which has two different 75mm, one of which very clearly better than the other. This one has 88 pen and 110 damage. And this one has 115 pen and 150 damage, so definitely a big upgrade there. It doesn't take too much to research, so that won't be a problem if you're working on this tank. Moving to tier 6, we have the STRV 74, which again has two different options of 75mm guns, one better than the other. The damage, however, does stay the same this time, but the pen goes up about from 128 to 148. Nice accuracy there, nice aim time. Fairly standard. It's not too terribly fast. It's got a specific power of 13.08, so it's more of your support medium tank. It's not more aggressive medium tank like a Cromwell per se. It's not like that. It's more like a 3485 or a Firefly, something like that. That kind of medium tank. Moving to the Leo, this is a very interesting tank. You have a tank with not great armor, but a really nice specific power, which is actually really close to the RU-251's specific power. And the top gun, which compares similarly to the A44's top gun. Although the aim time, accuracy, pen, it's all not great. So the alpha damage is really going to be your biggest advantage you have over any other medium tank of similar tier or of lower tier than this tank. And at tier 8, we find ourselves starting the heavy tank line with the Emil 1. Now, this tank, from what I've heard, these three tier 10 or tier 8, tier 9, and tier 10 mediums compare similarly to the French medium tanks, or heavy tanks. I'm going to close my window here, so people don't have to listen to me shout out this window. So yeah, at the tier 8 we have the Email 1, which has two different 10.5 centimeter guns, one of which with 179 pen, and those stats there. And this one gets an upgrade to 217 pen, and reloads the clip 3 seconds faster. Whoop-de-doo. The DPM does go up by about 100, and the accuracy stays the same, but the aiming time is actually worse on the upgraded gun. Something important to note. Again, all of these tanks, great gun depression. That does not change. Moving to the Email 2, we have a stock 105 centimeter gun from the, or 105 millimeter gun, I should say. Same thing, whatever. That is the upgraded gun on the Email 1. It just carries over. And the upgraded gun on this is actually the same gun. Yeah, the same gun you get on the Kranwagen, the tier 10 heavy tank, which is a 120 millimeter autoloader, just like on the 50B and on the T57 heavy. It compares, it's like right in between the two, the T57 heavy and the MX50B. It's kind of it's a halfway meeting point of the two tanks. So lowest pen of the three. That is a good thing to note. However, it has the best armor of any of them, and yeah. Another thing to note, yeah, the turrets of these three are all very well armored, and it has really good gun depression, like I've said. So this thing is going to be excellent. All three of these heavy tanks are going to be excellent at working ridge lines, which is really going to be something to look out for, and something that makes me want to get them, which I'm going to do. Scooching over to the tank destroyer line, we start out with a tank destroyer at tier 2 with a name that's really hard to say if I pronounce the entire thing. Let's take a look at this. Yeah, it doesn't even provide the whole name. It's the PVLVV FM42. It's the chassis of the FM42 that's... Okay, maybe it's not the chassis of the FM42. I thought that was somewhere... Oh, maybe it's this chassis. I'm not sure. That's M42. But, yeah. There you go. Thank you. Fairly standard tier 2 tank destroyer. 20mm autocannon, 37mm pop gun. Really good rate of fire on this, but low damage, so low damage per minute. Good aiming time. The 37mm on this is definitely preferred over the 20mm autocannon, although loading gold rounds in this thing could be enjoyable, but again, it's not fast. If you're going to be one of the people who drives around in tier 2 light tanks and are, fires all the autocannon rounds off and spams it and loads gold, this is not the tank for you. This is a tank destroyer. Go play the tier 2 fucking STRV M38 if you're going to do that. It's probably your better option. Or the M40L for that matter. Now, something confusing here happens. The FM42 was developed in 1939, pre-war stuff, right? Or possibly beginning of the war, but you go to the IKV-72, you have a 75mm gun here, and another 75mm gun. A slight upgrade between the two. But the thing to note with this, it doesn't affect the stats at all, but this was a tank that was developed in 1956 to 1958. That's a big gap. This tank, the only reason that it's this low in the tech tree is the fact that these were the guns that were used on it. If it had been using guns comparable to its time, it would not have been at this tier. Yeah, a total of 36 vehicles entered service before 1954. 1956 to 1958, the vehicles were re-equipped with a more powerful 105mm gun and remained in service until the mid-1970s. And that's the IKV-102 that had those 105mm guns. So this is the IKV-72, so smaller guns, right? Moving to Tier 4, we have the SAV M43, which has two fairly good options for guns. You have a 75 millimeter here. Excuse me. Fairly standard 75 millimeter, nothing really special about it. And you have a 105 mil gun that compares similarly to how the Hetzer performs. Now, the armor on this tank is not as good as the Hetzer's armor, but the gun is similar. So you can sort of do what the Hetzer does, but not to the extent that the Hetzer does, because it can take more hits because of the armor. Moving to the IKV-103, this tank only has a selection of 120 millimeter guns, or 105 millimeter guns, sorry. But these guns are fairly interesting. Let's take a look at this guy and this guy. These are actually the guns that would be mounted on the Tier 3 if it was the IKV-102. In fact, there it is right there, IKV-102. You have 112 pen and 320 damage, and you move over to here, you have 120 pen, 300 damage. The rate of fire goes up slightly. The accuracy gets a lot better. Overall, really solid medium tank. When I first looked at these, I thought they were just derp guns, kind of like how the SAV M43 has the gun that compares to the Hetzer. But these are fairly different. These are like, yeah, it's a 105 millimeter gun that has actual good pen and doesn't, derp things for 450, rather consistently shoots things for 300. So, slight difference there. We go to the IKV-65 version 2. Again, we kind of switch around here. We went from the IKV-72, which was the 1950s, to the SAV M43, which was 1941 to 1944. We then go to the IKV-103, which again was 1956 and all that, like the IKV-72 was. And the IKV-65 alternate 2 now is the mid-1960s. This thing is a fairly interesting looking tank. It's kind of funky looking, but it has no armor whatsoever. None of these tanks really have that much armor until you get very late into the series where angles get really extreme. This tank comes with some fairly nice guns though. It's got two versions of the 9cm Bofors guns. One 10 calibers longer than the other. You can tell by the the L43 and then L53, which means the pen will go up between the two. Yeah, from 155 to 180, right? The DPM is actually better on the stock gun versus the upgraded gun, but the accuracy gets better with the upgraded gun. So it's a matter of preference. DPM accuracy. Do you want to play longer range or closer range? Whichever. Of course, being a tank with very little armor, you probably want to go longer range. So upgraded gun is probably the better choice, in my opinion. Or at least for my playstyle. Water. Essential for life. IKV-90B, the Tier 7. It's a fairly funky looking tank, shall we say. It's not crazy looking, but it's odd. It's got, again, the 9cm Bofors, the upgraded one from the IKV-65-2. But now it's got another 9cm here that's got 210 pen. The accuracy, aim time, all that. Actually, the aim time is better on this one, but everything else on this is pretty much better than the stock gun. That's to be expected, right? The armor, again, is not great. Yeah, looking at that. But what we start to notice, if you look on this like area right here, on top of the tank, that's a lot of sloped area. And if you're firing something that does not like sloping, it's either APCR or heat. One of them does not like hitting sloped things. I think it's heat. But it will consistently bounce off like really sloped angles a lot more than something like AP or APCR, I believe. We go up to Tier 8 with the UDES, or UDS, I guess. I don't know. The UDES 03. Now, interesting feature with the Tier 8, Tier 9, and Tier 10 tank destroyers. They have a new gameplay feature that switches from, let me pull it up here, siege mode and travel mode, as you can see right there and right there. What these basically mean is that these three top tank destroyers have a fixed gun, which means they cannot move their gun at all. At least the Tier 9 and Tier 10 do. This one can move it a little. This one is a little different. But the Tier 9 and Tier 10 cannot move their gun at all. They have to move the entire chassis of the tank to actually aim the gun. But they've compensated, what Wargaming have done to compensate for this is they've made siege mode and travel mode. Travel mode is for moving around the map. You're moving, you can fire on the move, but it will not be accurate in any way, shape, or form. But what siege mode will allow you to do is go into more of a defensible position, and you can use, I believe it's called hydro-pneumatic suspension. What that is the tank itself can tilt the front up or down to aim the gun up or down. Hence, this really good gun depression and gun elevation angle. But you also see the gun traverse limit of 0 and 0 right there. Aside from that, in terms of guns, you have the 9cm from the last tank. But you go to the top tier gun on this, look at the penetration on that. 288 millimeters of penetration. You're in a Tier 8 medium or Tier 8 tank destroyer that can penetrate most Tier 10s with pretty much no problem, aside from just like bad angles that you get stuck at, like if you have a mouse barreling or moss barreling down on you and you're like, then you might have to load the heat. But otherwise, this gun is just insane with the amount of pen. But what brings it down a hell of a lot is the aiming time. You can see that's 3 seconds right there. Oh, there we go, 3 seconds. Now, sort of compensated because of the fact that while you're in siege mode, you're turning the tank and you're very slowly moving. You can't move as fast as you could in travel mode if you're in siege mode. But while you're in siege mode and turning the entire tank, it's like you're in a medium tank and turning the turret. That's how much of an effect turning the entire tank will have. So that 3 seconds of aiming time is not that bad, because it's not as much dispersion when you move the tank itself. It still is a pain to actually have to aim for some amount of time, but it's not as bad as it looks. The STRV-0. This is basically the pre-version or prototype version of the STRV-103. It's the baby brother, right? It's got basically the same gun as the UDES for the stock gun. The upgraded gets a pen of 308, and the characteristic that stays the same with these guys is the aim time. That stays at 3 seconds, but you can see the accuracy is all the way up to 0.4. This tank is not going to be great at sniping, and with the somewhat lack of armor, it is extremely sloped, I'll give it that, but it's not great armor. It's 40 millimeters at on the front of the hull. This entire thing is like 40 millimeters, but it's extremely sloped. So something like lower tiers will be able to actually bounce off the front of this tank, but you get higher tier tanks and they'll be like dink dink dink, or not. Wow, no, they'll be going through. I mean, I just did the completely wrong thing. Yeah, you can see here actually with the suspension, it shows it has hydropneumatic suspension, allows switching to seats and travel mode. I just noticed that. But yeah, so that's this guy. And then the STRV 103B, it's got the same gun, same top gun, but the difference between the 103.0 and the 103B, big difference, is the dispersion. You go to the 103.0, you have a dispersion of 0.4. You go to the 103B, you have a dispersion of 0.3. That gets immensely better. You get so much better at hitting things from far distances. That's the accuracy of like an E50M. It's awesome. The aim time, still not great, but again, it's not as bad as it looks. And the other thing to note that's special about this tank, aside from the whole siege mode and travel mode thing, is look at the front of the STRV 103.0. It's just like the front of the tank. You look at the 103B, it's got this like shield thing here, right? That is a shield that will block heat shells. Now, as we know, once heat hits something, it will kind of... I'm not sure about the exact way it does about this, but once it hits something, it will lose penetration very quickly afterwards. Whereas, you know, other shells will penetrate through that shield and possibly go into the hull. But heat will have a much harder time going through the front of this tank because of that thing on the front. Now, I've shown you most of the stats. Now let's take a look at these fancy models, all in HD of course, which is very nice. We have the Tier 1, the STRV FM421, right? This cute thing here. 4 crew members, all the stats right there. If you want to take a longer look at them, you can pause the video and check it all out. Or, alternatively, you can get on here and look for yourself. But the queue that I had to sit in a couple different times was anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000, or not, yeah, 5,000 and 10,000 people, but that goes down sort of quickly. It takes about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to actually get onto the server, but once you do, it's worth it. These things are really cool. So yeah, here's the Tier 1, this really funky looking thing. Sort of like the T1 Cunningham, where it's, you know, long out in the front and then, you know, raised up in the back with the turret back there. And then, of course, that's the 20mm. And here's the 37mm. Not much difference, of course. We move on to the STRV M38. There's the stock turret. And here's the upgraded turret. And you got the 20mm autocannon, of course. And the 37mm. Tier 3 STRV M40L. Got the 2 37mm options. Model doesn't seem to change much. The turret doesn't change much either, to be honest. So, also, if you guys are noticing something similar, these tanks are very similar to the Tolly 3, I believe. They sort of look like it. I'm not positive, but I think they are. Or maybe it's Hungarian. I'm not sure, but they're closely related. The Lago gets a lot bigger. It's first medium tank, so it's gonna get bigger, of course. The guns that you can mount on this thing, a whole bunch of different little stubby guns. You got this first 47mm. Look how cute it is, right? And then you get a big bulky 75mm gun. And the fact that that's such a stubby gun, the accuracy isn't that great, of course. You go up to the 57mm, which in the tech tree isn't the upgraded one, but here it is, I guess. Does get sort of long. So there you go. Moving to Tier 5, you have this really funky looking thing, the STRV M42. We got 2 guns, of course. One that's just like a stub. It's basically the 75mm that's on the Lago. But the upgraded gun is really big looking thing. But what that does mean is that it's a lot better, because the longer gun means more pen and faster shell velocity as well, I believe. Another important thing before I keep moving along to note is that on the STRV M40L, the standard ammo on just the upgraded gun, if you look, is actually APCR. That's the standard ammo on this upgraded gun. So your shell velocity, you're not going to have to aim or give much lead to the enemy tank, which is sort of nice. Let's see. So we finished the STRV M42, the STRV 74, big funky looking thing. This is essentially, if you notice, this is the chassis of the premium tank. But the premium tank has the turret of the AMX 13 on it, whereas this one has the usual turret that it would have. The previous one looks something like that, not too much different. And then the other gun, sort of longer, which is actually why... No, never mind. I thought it had better accuracy. It doesn't. This one is better. Yeah, moving on. To the Leo. This is actually a pretty sleek looking tank, but it's also sort of big. It's like low profile. Like I said, similar specific power to the RU. It actually doesn't look too much different from the RU, to be honest. It's kind of big. The turret doesn't seem to change much. The gun, however, big freaking gun. The STRVs are the 74 millimeters, are the previous 74 millimeters from the other tanks. And there you have the Leo. All of these tanks all have, in fact, I should just say this right now, every single tank in this line has 4 crew members or less, and a lot of them actually only have 3. So these are tanks that you may get all your crew members knocked out in from a high explosive shell at some point. Moving on to the first heavy tank of the line, the Emil 1. Now, I'm going to zoom out a little here, and one thing you may notice is this thing looks kind of small, and your eyes are not deceiving you. This is actually a really small heavy tank, for a heavy tank, of course. Let's take a look at something like this strong heavy tank, KV2. There's your KV2. Your height is way up there. And if you look at the Emil 1, there's your Emil 1. Very small tank. In fact, I was looking at something else earlier. If we turn on the British here, it's about the height of the Cromwell. Emil 1, Cromwell. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's what that looks like. Pretty cool looking tank, if I say so myself. Emil 2, it's a lot better. Or not a lot better, but it is a little more interesting. It is taller, of course, but not by too terribly much. It's more like average heavy tank height now. Not too far off from the KV2 anymore. Or at least it's closer. The turret shape has changed a little. Gun doesn't protrude out much more like that anymore. It's kind of like with the turret. This is an oscillating turret, if you couldn't see. This back part and the gun will go up and down in unison, but this front part here, I believe, like this whole area will stay in the same place. Moving to the Krenwagen, it doesn't change too much in looks, if you couldn't tell. I did put camo on this, so yeah, there's this fun thing, the PVLVV, this really cute tank destroyer. There you go. So cute, so tiny. It is an open-topped thing. High explosive shells will fuck this thing up. IKV-72, again open-topped, not much armor. Very cool-looking thing. It's got this weird thing covering the casement here. The SAV M43, closed-topped. No more artillery shells going through there, or at least without going through 15 millimeters of top armor, or. Well, no, that's front, sides, and rear, but it's got shit for armor, so yeah, high explosive will still fuck it. IKV 103, you can tell it's similar in some ways to the IKV 72. It's got this big old fancy gun, that doesn't actually change in looks between the two. We go to the Tier 6, the IKV 65 Alternate 2. It's got big, nice Bofors gun. The shorter version is the stock one. But as you can tell, this is a very interesting looking tank with almost no armor, 15, 10, and 10. For some reason my clan emblem is bugged out there, I don't know why. We got the IKV 90 Type B, which is a first of like the funky ones, you know, like I said in the tech tree. There's that, two 90 millimeter Bofors. The UDES 03. There's this thing. The gun, I think it's actually able to go up and down by itself, but it can't go side to side. That's what I was trying to say earlier. This is the first tank that gets the hydro pneumatic suspension. Again, the STRV 1030. Basically the STRV 103B without the shield. Very cool looking. And there we see I put camo on and we got the shield in the front now. Very funky, very interesting vehicles. Again, only 3 crew members. Very interesting, very cool. I'm not sure if I will do the tank destroyer line, but I would not be opposed to it, so we'll see how this goes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this bonus content. I usually don't put up videos on Friday, of course. You will get your, don't worry, you will get your video tomorrow, of course, being the weekend. Or not, well, video tomorrow, video Sunday, something like that. Something this weekend. I will see you then.